So, okay, now our bread has been proofing, or our dough has been proofing for a little over 9 hours. You can see it's more than doubled in size. It's got some nice bubbles, and it smells really good. When you poke it, you can feel it's kind of got a little bit of a spongy feel to it. It's not a thick, heavy dough. It's kind of a wet dough. And I make my recipe makes kind of a wet dough. And that makes a more airier dough, like big bubbles inside of it when you eat it. So, anyway, we're going to go ahead and we're going to dump this out. And we're going to stretch it. And by stretching stretching out those gluten strands within the bread, and that makes it, when the yeast is heated in the oven, it helps everything expand and the bubbles create and poof the bread up. And that's how the yeast is going to work. Anyway, once we do that, then we're going to have to shape the bread. And that's why it's a good idea to have a little wine, because frankly this is something I'm not really great at. And the reason I'm not great at it is that in order to shape bread well, you need to practice a lot. And people will make loaves of bread and loaves of bread and loaves of bread and practice to get their rolling technique down or shaping technique down. I keep it pretty simple. If you have a little glass of wine, you're kind of loose, and you just don't care that the bread's not absolutely perfect. Especially if we're going to free-form shape it, which we're going to do, because I think tomorrow you're probably going to be letting it do its proof on the back of a cookie sheet. I would like to recommend a nice three-legged dog from Dunham Cellars. It is a moderately priced red blend. Wonderful story behind the three-legged dog. He was a real dog. He was found in a ditch. He has long since passed away, but it's a great wine and a great story about the dog. And the wine is from Walla Walla, Washington. Very nice, full-bodied blend. And it makes you feel really good when you're shaping your bread. So, one more sip and then we'll get going. So the first thing that we want to do is get some flour on our board or our counter. I'm going to use the big cutting board tonight. And you're going to take some flour and you're going to throw it on here. Nice. Not too much, but, you know, kind of get it on there. The bread, I'm not too worried about the bread sticking at this point. And when I take the dough out, I let the dough fall on its own out of the container. And it will pull away from the sides. And you can do this whether you put it in a bowl or a container like this. This just adds to more of that stretchiness. And you see most of it came out. There. And you can see how it looks really wet. It's not a thick, stiff dough. So I get a little flour on my hands and I kind of just push it into a square. I kind of push it out a little bit. And then now it's a little bit of a square, not too much, right? I take one side and I stretch and I pull it over. I take one side, I stretch and I pull it over. I take one side, I stretch, I pull it over. I take one side, I stretch and I pull it over. And now I'm going to let it rest for just a little bit. It's got some bubbles. You can see these bubbles all forming right there. See all of that? Those are great. It's a great sign that our yeast is working very well. It's eating and it's gassing. It's fat and happy. That's what we want our dough to be like. But I don't want too many bubbles right now, so I'm just going to kind of punch a few out. And we're going to let the bread rest. There. Okay, and just kind of neat things up a little bit. One of these scrapers is awesome to use. I keep my tea towel, and we'll just cover it up. And we're going to let it rest for just maybe 15 minutes. It can rest for about 30. I've tested around to see if there was any difference in the resting time. If it changed the bread too much, it really didn't. You can kind of hurry the process along. So while this is resting, we're going to get our cookie sheet ready for putting our shaped dough on the cookie sheet. And you're going to say, why has she got that cookie sheet upside down instead of this one with the rims up? And I will show you why. When you use a pizza peel, and suppose your bread were down in here, ready to go on the peel to then go in the oven, doesn't work very well. If you flip this over, your bread is on there, you can grab a corner of it. Okay, one more sip of wine. If the loaf or loaves of bread are on there, you can quickly scoop them off and you have a nice smooth surface to work. One of the considerations to doing a free shape on the back of a cookie sheet is if I put my shaped dough on here or my loaves, now this whole thing needs to go someplace to proof, and it needs to have room because this is a big area, so it's going to have to go in the fridge, and that's a lot of space, bigger space to keep covered. So that's one of the reasons why I do like to use the bannetons. And you can split this amount of dough into two and put 2 loaves. You'll get 2 of these. That much dough makes 2 loaves, 9-inch. Or this dough will make 1 round banneton. And you can see how much smaller that is to put in the refrigerator than a big cookie sheet. But for the time being, because I'm making this video for my cousin so that she can make her loaf of bread, I'm going to use the cookie sheet. And I used the cookie sheet for years and years. The bread was able to spread more, and I get a little flatter loaf as opposed to a poofier, fuller, better shaped loaf. And you'll see that tomorrow after it's proofed and you can see what shape it has. But that's one of the benefits to using the banneton or a bowl with a tea towel inside of it for proofing. So, just for video's sake, we're going to pretend that this is just about ready. And this is rice flour. You can buy it, Bob's Red Mill makes it. I think there are some other brands out there. And the reason I use rice flour to prevent my bread from sticking on the surface is because it burns at a higher temperature than flour. If I were to put regular flour on here and then I have regular flour on my bread, I get it in the oven and it starts to burn a little faster. This is also like, it feels kind of like little beads, and the peel will slide on this more easily, the bread will slide on it more easily, and nothing sticks. It's great stuff actually. You'll find you'll use it on your peel, you'll see it left over on your stone, and it's not burnt. It doesn't have a burnt flavor. So, for today's demonstration with the bread, I am going to just make it into one big round, and we'll let it kind of spread out on there tonight. If I was worried about it spreading too much, or I didn't want it to spread too much, you can take a tea towel and make a little round shape on your pan and put your bread in there to try to hold it from spreading, because you can see how easily this would spread around. It's pretty soft. Just another little hint that you can use for shaping your bread. So, anyway, one of the things when you're shaping your dough is that you want to make sure that it has a smooth surface. So in this case, I'm going to take the bread and I pinch it and I roll it. Pinched it together. I need to make sure my hands don't stick. I'm just using and I'm pulling it together. And I'm pinching underneath, and see how the skin over the top becomes a little taut? You can already see some more bubbles forming. Those will be there. And just so that you can see what happens if you do this on your counter, you pick this up. Again, you're rolling and kind of pulling at the same time. And you get it into a nice round shape. And you can kind of use the counter to pull it. Okay, so it's nice and taut at the top. I've been pulling it, so there should be underneath. It should have kind of collected together. I'm going to use my scraper. Let's find something else that you can use in case you don't have one. A spatula with a flat surface like this would work just fine. We're going to scoop it and we're going to place it directly on the pan. So this is your loaf of bread. You can see already it's kind of starting to spread out, but more and more bubbles are forming. So tonight, I am going to kind of use a method. I take a tea towel, I get it ever so slightly damp, and I mean just slightly damp. I like it because it keeps the bread a little moister and stretching more easily. I cover that this way. And then I'm going to take a big piece of plastic or saran and I'm going to lay that over the top. We're going to stick this in the refrigerator and it's going to proof overnight in the refrigerator. And then we will bring it out tomorrow. Let it sit out at room temperature slowly to finish off, get to room temperature and finish off that last little bit of proofing. One of the reasons we do that with sourdough bread or sourdough yeast is that that really slow proofing helps the bread develop more flavor. It gets a little more of that sour flavor in it, and that's what we're looking for. If you do this very quickly, you lose some of that flavor and you also lose some of the bubbles. So anyway, we're going to call that good, and I'm going to get it covered with a piece of plastic just to keep it a little extra protected in the refrigerator. And then once that's proofed, we'll bring it back out tomorrow and we'll pick up where we are and then we'll get ready to bake the bread. See you later. Oh, have more wine.